Hello, everyone. This is a deeply important episode of the podcast, and we want to share with you why it is so special to us and so powerful.
This episode changed how we see everything about our lives, and we don't say that lightly.
During the episode, we explore people-pleasing through the lens of the Fawn response.
The raw vulnerability of this episode is an inside look into a private side of our relationship that we don't share on the podcast, or publicly for that matter.
We experience moments like this in our relationship all the time, but they are close, intimate, sacred moments where we support one another with unconditional love as we heal.
We invite you to listen with an open heart and get curious about what may come up in you.
Like we said, it changed how we see everything.
Lastly, if you feel moved or impacted by this episode, please share it.
We are excited to share this episode with the world because we believe it will be incredibly healing for so many.
Thank you for listening and supporting the podcast.
With our deepest of love,
Steph.
And Craig.
So we're super excited for this episode. It's one that we have been planning for probably over, I was going to say like a year. It's not. Maybe a week, maybe 4 days.
It's been longer than that. We've been hemming and hawing about it and really getting curious about the way that it shows up in our space and the connection that we have made. So we took our time to like sit with it and like feel into it and do a little more research and just
it's so much in our space right now. Right? I mean, it's something that just keeps coming up over and over and over. It's kind of like last week's episode was guilt. First off, we're talking about people pleasing. Mm-hmm. I forgot we needed to give this big caveat at the beginning. Yes,
big caveat.
So we're going to talk about people pleasing, but we're going to try to do our best to look at it through the lens of it being a trauma response, and more specifically, the Fawn response. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the lens that we're going to be unpacking this in, because that's where we feel most drawn to, I guess, when it comes to this topic. We're having the most connections for our own journey. So that's how we're going to kind of look at it.
And from our communication with you and on the page and throughout and the clients we worked with, it's really fitting that space. So that's why we're coming at it from the single as well.
And so we also fully acknowledge that it's a full spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. The things that we're going to talk about or your understanding of people pleasing, however it relates to your life, it falls on that big, long spectrum. So what essentially, as we talk about this and explore this during this episode, do not think that we're saying that you're stuck in a Fawn response all the time. You might be, of course, but we're going to find out. So real quick, keep talking, Steph. I got to put the incense out. You
got to put it out? Do you want to just open the window or no? So I did, how did I do with the talking? I did. I'm like, hey, let's just focus really on this thing that you were trying to not have focus for.
We don't do that very often on the podcast.
So I don't know what to do. I'm just like, I'm going to focus.
I love it. It makes me feel like we're in some it makes me, truthfully, when we burn incense and we record the podcast, I feel like we're teenagers and we're hanging out in our bedroom. And we're like burning incense and having conversations, like, exploring the cosmos. So that's what burning incense feels like when we do it. Yeah. But because I'm not a teenager and I'm a 42-year-old man, you can hear that it fucks up my throat immediately. Because it dawned on me, I'm like, why am I gotta keep clearing my throat?
Hold on. I used to burn incense in my room and smoke and tell my parents that it was just the incense. And they were heavy smokers. So either they... I don't know, either they believed it or they just chose to not.
I think I burned incense wishing that I had a cigarette that I could be smoking and covering it up with. Yeah, such different life.
I would do that. I would do that occasionally. And then when I was an older teenager, they just gave up and let me smoke. So then I could just smoke in my room. I was so cool. It's terrible.
It is terrible.
It's terrible.
Smoking in the bathroom.
I just heard "Smoking in the Boys' Room" and that song started playing in my head.
That's what I thought
Smoking? You said smoking in the bathroom.
Well, that's what I meant to say.
Yeah. Well, that's what they meant, smoking in the boys' room.
Okay. Last week's episode, guilt trips. Okay. As I was unpacking that for myself and leading up to that episode, as well as after the fact, right? Because we're always constantly exploring these topics for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I started to really correlate and connect my level of people pleasing that I do. And I've never looked at it, right, from that lens, because I'm like, I don't feel like I'm a people pleaser. I actually feel like I'm really selfish. And it dawned on me, like, that's what's reflecting back to me all the time is people are telling me that I'm selfish, right? Because of all of my actions and all of my behaviors and all the choices that I made, they seem so selfish. And I'm like, but then I really looked at the thought processes and the feelings and the emotions and my behaviors And I'm like, I think I probably do a lot of people pleasing more than I do like selfish acts. So then I had to start getting really curious. So that's kind of like how this has been sitting in my space just a little bit, right? There's obviously way more to it, but what and how does it feel like it has been in your space? Are you okay?
I am. I'm suddenly just like, I got lost in that. I'm like, this tea is good. I got like suddenly, I knew you were turning it to me and I could feel the panic rising. And so I'm just like, you made it sound like you were going to go first. And then here you are spotlighting me, buddy.
I don't want to immediately dive to like how I recognize that I've been stuck in the fawn response my whole fucking life, instead of thinking that I was in some sort of like, oh, I'm in the, anyways, I didn't want to get that far yet.
Yeah.
But we're going to get that far.
We're going to get that far.
Because that's what it feels like.
Well, it's like it's both, right? But then you have the awareness of, oh my goodness, I'm so freaking nervous. Let's just acknowledge that right off the bat. This is a hot topic.
Why do you think so, right?
And I'm nervous.
I'm so curious. Why do you think so?
What do you mean?
Like, what is that? Why does this bring up the anxiety, bring up the fear? What is it? I'm curious. I'm genuinely asking.
Well, I'm clearly able to communicate very effectively right now.
You're looking at me like I'm trying to attack you.
That's what it's feeling. Like I'm very defensive right now. You're not doing that. I'm just noticing the way that it's reacting in my body. So I'm trying to calm myself and breathe and be like, this is what's happening. I'm in a reactive state. I didn't think I'm ready for this episode, but I'm feeling like, whoo, it just threw my I'm feeling very reactive. I'm very defensive. I'm feeling very scared. It's like, oh, here's this thing. And now we're going to look right at it. And obviously we can do that. But I was also like, full disclosure, I was incredibly vulnerable last night. I had, I'm not going to get into what it was, but I had a complete like raw vulnerability that I let be seen. And afterward, I just like cocooned.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm still in that phases of like that complete raw and vulnerable in a way that I do not have practice being raw and vulnerable. So it was stepping into that new space.
Super big hangover.
And oh my gosh, yeah, I'm ready to start bawling right now. So I'm feeling all of these, like the ways that it's like in my belly right now. And then this, so it's what it is. I'm still showing up, but I'm feeling very, very vulnerable. And now I'm about to be vulnerable again. And I'm like, I think I hit my quota. Maybe we should do a fun podcast.
Your window of tolerance for vulnerability.
Yeah. And so to try and step back into it. So I'm going to try again, but I don't even remember the question you asked me. So if you could re-ask me, I'm going to try and get back into this
Essentially,
space.
That's kind of the question is like, why is this so triggering and disruptive? The idea that maybe we're people pleasers or that maybe we're actually in the fawn response, I think is what it really is, right? Because when I brought that up to you, we hadn't ever had that correlation or connection.
Yeah.
I'm sure like it's obvious, I think, to some people, right? Because it's a very clear protective mechanism, people pleasing, right? And when I realized, I'm like, wait a minute, that feels like the fawn response.
Yeah.
Like when I'm trying to, like, this is a good example.
Okay.
In you and me, in our relationship, there's so many times where we're emotionally monitoring each other. And when we're emotionally monitoring, I'll just speak for myself, right? Like when I'm in that state, I suddenly place all of my needs to like way, way, way in the back, right? I'm not thinking about what my needs are in the moment.
Okay.
All I'm thinking about is your needs, your well-being, your health, and how I can help in those regards. Because I'm trying to regulate and help your nervous system externally, right? Because I can feel the disruption. So I'm trying to do all of that because it's disrupting my nervous system, right?
So you're doing all that so you can in tune, then feel safe for yourself.
So then I can then feel safe.
So it's like this projection of like, here, it's all about you, but really I need calmness so I can feel okay.
Right. Which if we look at it, like now we apply the lens of like people pleasing to that, right? Essentially it's like I'm people pleasing, or when I'm in that state where I'm people pleasing, it's really a protective mechanism because I don't feel safe.
Right. And so if we start to unpack that and say, well, if you didn't feel safe, you felt like you were at risk of being hurt, abandoned, neglected, violated.
Yeah, like when I don't feel safe with you, it's because the relationship's over. You're going to leave, you're done with me, you're going to throw me away. Basically, our love, our relationship is gone.
And so you learned that as a kid. And then you learned how to forget your needs in that moment, even though it's still, we understand that it's still about your needs, but we're looking at the little kid here.
Right.
Okay. So you learned how to forget your needs to protect yourself and solely focus on the other person.
Taking care of the other person's needs.
The other person, because then it becomes safe.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're taking care of them, you're emotionally supporting them, you're physically supporting them, all the ways that are going to be really detrimental for a child to have the responsibility of supporting anybody in that stage, then in a sense you're safe. Because whatever's happening is
because now I'm still loved.
You're still loved, or like it's going to be easier. It's not going to be as bad. You're still going to be taken care of. So you learned how to people please from that state.
Yes.
So in the whole, like the stress response, the fawn response is. I was like, I'll turn it over to you.
Sorry, Alex Trebek. What's the answer to that one?
It is when you are taking care of others. You're going with what they want. You're doing what they no.
No. You're totally fine.
Okay.
You're like what you were saying is exactly.
Okay.
But I'm stuck in the moment of just a few seconds ago.
Okay.
Where you brought up, because essentially you described why I people please.
Okay.
Right? Because I had to maintain the relationship with my mom. So I'm she's not only my primary caregiver, right? But I had to this was what was really fascinating as I've been unpacking this and thinking about it is that behavior of placing my needs, not even placing my needs, not even having awareness of my needs, right? There's zero awareness of my needs from the perspective of I guess from a healthy boundary type. And that's normal for a kid. I'm trying to unpack this now as we're talking about it, but I definitely don't want to go too deep into it.
Yeah.
This episode will just demolish into a fucking sobbing fit of tears. And then Craig will just sit in the hot tub for the next 4 days. Anywho, that's where mine started, was learning how to prioritize my mom's needs above mine always. And I never understood that from the perspective of people pleasing. And I realized that that's exactly what it is, right? I'm doing everything in a sense to please her so that she still loves me, because I have some story in my head that I lost that love in some regards, right? And if we go down that rabbit hole, then that's where we dissolve into tears, right? But up here on the surface a little bit, I'm unpacking all of it and I'm recognizing, I'm that's the fawn response. Because just as you were starting to describe it, it's I know what fight is. That's a very clear response that I'm familiar with, right? I know what flee, right? That's another one that I'm
got it.
I know what it means
I know how to GTFO.
Bail on a relationship or
anything. It's peace.
I know how to do that.
Yeah.
I know what
that wasn't a slam. I was yeah.
I know what the frozen state is, right? I've experienced that type of trauma response, that nervous system response. And then a few years back, I don't know when the fawn response became recognized. But at some point, because I don't feel like it was when we were growing up, and even in the early 2000s, and I could be wrong. It's probably been around.
It might have been. I wasn't in the space where that was brought to me, so it wasn't in my wheelhouse. That's
so maybe within the last decade, we've kind of had awareness of the fawn response.
Yeah. That's when it became whether on scene or at least present in our space. That is. Yeah.
And when I first initially heard about it, I'm here we go again. We're trying to in all honesty, I equated it to LGBTQ because it was they just continually keep adding letters to that. So here we are with fight, flight, freeze, fawn. They just keep adding more things to this human response. And so 15 years ago.
Oh, this is 10 years. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sitting over here. I'm I don't even know what to say next.
No. I'm so sorry. From the mindset that I was in,
that you were in
when I first initially started to hear about the fawn response.
I'm so glad you clarified that.
Yes.
Not just, for everyone else, but for me too. I was what did you just say?
Vastly different.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
That's another thing that I've actually been thinking about that I want to do another episode about.
Yeah.
Where I feel like I'm stuck in the middle between two different generations.
Yeah.
Like I'm in this generation almost spiritually, meaning completely all-encompassing, loving everybody. Like from everybody gets to be exactly who they are. We're totally accept. Like that's the spiritual aspect of where my true nature lies. But then I have some other like part of me that's stuck in like the generation of what we grew up in the 80s.
Yeah.
Where it's like, not that. Do you know what I mean? So that game
we
in
can
my
do that
head,
in another podcast, right?
But so 10 or 15 years ago when the Fawn response comes on my radar, that was kind of the first initial processing of it. I was like, here we go. They're just trying to make this all inclusive for everybody.
Yeah. There's a lot of resistance to that.
Yeah. And
that'd be a good one to unpack on another episode.
Right?
I know, because I can feel like you're like, oh, I'm ready to unpack it right now. You're ready to switch the episode.
No.
But you're good?
No, yeah.
Okay.
And then over the years, I just kind of ignored it.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just like, when I would think about, am I in an activated state? Am I in the fight, flight, freeze? No, I'm not. And then in the back of my mind, there would be a voice that would be like, don't forget Fawn. And I'm like, whatever, who cares? Right. And then the more that I sit in it and the more that I recognize it and the more that we kind of have gone down this fucking journey that we've gone down, I'm recognizing now from my understanding of it now, right, through my own process and my own healing and everything like that, when I think of the Fawn response, it's like it's the activated state, the nervous system activated state that I am in by far the most.
Yeah.
Because what I'm trying to do. Makes sense of why
you're so like resistant to it.
Right.
Why you're like, fuck that, that's stupid.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
all the ways that you could like.
All I'm doing is try to make people love me.
Yeah.
All I'm doing is trying to make sure, not just make sure that people love me, that people don't leave me.
Yeah.
Like I get so incredibly unhealthily attached to people.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes like, how do I just make them happy in every way possible? And I can look at it through that lens now and see it in all of my relationships growing up with like friends and all of my buddies and all those kind of guys that I hung out with in my teenage years and everything like that. And of course, up into adulthood, right? I do it immensely with friends. And then I looked at like all of the intimate relationships and all the like girlfriends that I had over the years and everything like that. And I'm just like, how did I not realize that my nervous system is so activated that I'm in this fawn response all the time, because there's always this like piece inside of me that is afraid that people are going to leave me.
Yeah.
That people don't love me, that I'm not worthy of love. And there's times where it will be activated in a sense where I will then cover up that wound with anger, right?
Anger,
which
sabotage.
Is my fight, right? Or my complete dissociation and completely like leaving my body at times. So I can recognize all of those, but I didn't recognize that like the fawn response was the homeostasis place that Craig just exists in.
Yeah.
And then I looked at like what it actually, I'm emotionally monitoring right now because I'm super nervous.
See, it's at the beginning when I was being vulnerable and I'm like, fuck, I'm not ready.
It feels like I'm upsetting you and you're
vulnerable.
Like getting pissed off at the things that I'm saying. And so
I got triggered what you said earlier, but then you addressed it quickly.
Okay.
So I was like, I was really, really surprised. I was like, that doesn't, what? So it was just.
But you can see like 15 year ago, Craig, right?
Yeah, I can see like we a lot of growth, a lot of like healing, a lot of like, there's just, I don't even like, so that's a whole other podcast. I'm speaking to this now on, without having like, that's not the way you feel. That's not, and you address that, but you just really caught me off guard because that's not you.
Are you still kind of swimming in that?
No,
did I pick up on that? Or
but
did you
that's
let
what
it
I think the remnant, I let it go. Cause as soon as you clarified it, it was fine.
Okay. So please.
Just put the microphone in my face. I can't breathe. It's
if you're just listening,
I need to get it out. I can't breathe. Excuse me. Okay.
When I get anxious,
the audio cannot be that great today because if the mic's right in my face, I feel like I'm being suffocated.
The audio is always great.
Okay, then don't touch my mic.
I adjust your mic when I'm anxious.
It's funny. It really feels like it cuts off my breath. Yeah. You put it in my face, and I'm like,
yeah.
You're like, you're fine. You can breathe. No, I can't.
Okay, everybody, let's take a deep breath. We're just talking about people pleasing.
When your podcast hosts are completely activated and still showing up to record,
this is what we're doing.
It looks like this.
It's a hard topic because we are looking at it through the lens of activation. It's not, and that's like at the beginning, right? We were talking about how it's on a spectrum.
Yeah.
So like if, of course you want to do nice things for people.
Yeah,
right?
That's not a bad thing.
Exactly.
Like people get the like when people are saying don't be a people pleaser, it's unhealthy. Like they're somehow getting the message that you're supposed to be an asshole.
Right. That you got to go to the other end of the spectrum where it's like,
don't do anything for anybody. Be mean. Only be like nobody's saying that. But I think that's what you were taught that it looks like if you're not caretaking everybody else's needs. You were told that you were being selfish or being an asshole, so you learned how to not be selfish, not be like to please, to keep people in your space, or to keep the people that were in your space that you couldn't do anything about as safe as possible. And oftentimes that looked like as least harmful as possible in your space. So now that's your association. So of course, why would you do anything different? So you hear that defensively, maybe, right? Maybe you hear that defensively because that's the association you have. That's how you were taught. And that's why you're so resistant to it. And you keep sacrificing yourself over and over and over again, because what else are you supposed to do? What else are you supposed to do?
Let's unpack a little bit, because I feel like I just got done sharing like why this is triggering me so much, right? And I'm curious as you know, what comes up for you as we start?
Well, you blew me away with it. Like, and I feel kind of like dumb for not, and it's okay. Like it's going to pass.
I felt dumb.
But you were like, all the work we've done, right? All the therapy, all the like, and you said this and you're like, oh, I'm back. Like people pleasing is basically, I don't have your verbiage, but people pleasing is the Fawn response. And I like immediately, I was like, what? And then, oh shit. Like it hit in a way that like I think it took all the years of everything that we've been doing for me to be able to connect that. And yeah, I'm sure lots of people are going to be listening and like, yeah, we've known that for years. I'm really glad. That's really cool that you've had that much time to start to work with it and unpack it. That was a brand new revelation.
I've never seen the association between those two things.
I haven't either.
One feels like people pleasing feels like this is the way that I'm viewing it now, right?
Okay.
People pleasing is the Fawn response. But the way that we talk about the Fawn response is through the lens of people pleasing, because that's acceptable in society. Right. So you can talk about your trauma out loud with people and it's acceptable. And because there's a lot of things that society will do that with, where they'll take a really serious topic and then they'll mask it with something.
Right. I mask it with humor. That was
like, for example, functional alcoholic.
Right. That's
right.
Like,
don't you just mean an alcoholic?
Yeah. Like what?
Well, no, they actually get out of bed and hold a job and okay.
So functional is not rock bottom. And that's like,
but that's what I'm talking about is it's like the
and that's not an attack on like, that's a serious disease.
Yeah.
That's a serious, like, we're just saying like when you're not masking, like this isn't about masking things.
Yeah. And so that's how I see it now.
Okay.
So it blew you away.
Yeah. If I can go back. I lost my train of thought, babe. Well, shit. I lost my train of thought.
Like you just had never seen it that way before.
I'd never seen it that way before. And so like it hit on a different space. And it was like, okay. So I started even like looking more into like listening to more podcasts and like just like really diving into experts talking about people pleasing. And there's association with it being like from separation, from abandonment, and to pull love in, right? They have that, but it was this part of trauma that I'm not hearing. And then and again, people will pull away if you don't describe their trauma. And if you don't say it in a way that they can actually connect to, because there's so many different types of trauma. There's the big T and the little t, which we've talked about. There's the trauma from things that happened to you, and there's trauma from things that needs that were not met. And that's just like a really short way of saying it. And then when we are in that fawn response, the other thing that happens in that people-pleasing mode, that fawn response, is we put others that might be causing harm or did cause harm on a pedestal. Because if we're in that mode of not upsetting them, then they can do no wrong. You'll hear a lot like, I had a great childhood. My parents were wonderful. I don't know why I keep ending up in these habits and in these cycles, why all my relationships are going to crap. And no, it must be that relationship. Everything started. Now, granted, things can happen in really shitty relationships. And maybe you did have a wonderful childhood and your parents were like totally on point. That is wonderful. That's not as common as we all would like it to be. So there's these other factors that play in. And even if your parents were, like, it's not saying that your parents were bad too. A lot of this really gets, like, those people pleasers really get locked into, yeah, but they did the best they could. Yeah, but, and all of that's true. Like, I feel like I'm losing you here. All of that
Please keep going. I have something that I'm trying to write down, but I don't want to interrupt you. So keep going.
So all of that is true. Your parents absolutely did do the best they could, but it doesn't mean that what you experienced wasn't difficult, wasn't harmful, wasn't hurtful, wasn't things that you need that are like healing now for you to take place on. It doesn't mean that patterns weren't created. And it also doesn't mean that if your parents had the skill set that they wouldn't have, like, if they had the ability that they wouldn't change everything. They might not. You might have parents that like do not fit on that board. But another thing that pulls people away is just being like, no, they did the best they could. They worked their ass off. They didn't have shit and they did the best they could. So of course they made the choices, and that is a fact. But we also have to take time to look at what it meant to us, what happened to us as kids, what happened to us growing up, what it feels like now when we're still in that role, and how to find some separation on that and to not glorify. That way we can humanize ourselves as well. Humanize ourselves as well as like our needs do matter. Our needs are healthy. We have healthy needs. It's healthy to have needs that need to be met. It's healthy to say, I'm going to say no to this, and then that's it. You don't have to say, because I really need this. You don't have to be in such peril and such ill health and such a terrible situation to justify a no for anything else. You can just like, a no can be a no. And to not have such a threat of losing people. And I guess there's a lot more that I can go off on that, but you just wrote stuff down. So before I continue that tangent, I'm going to pause and be like, what is it that sparked in you?
I don't know if we're going to be able to unpack it.
Okay. I definitely kind of spiraled out a little bit.
No, you did great.
I definitely spiraled.
You didn't spiral at all, babe. I'm going to spiral right now.
Well, this is the Spiral podcast.
Because you said I guess I could read what I wrote, how that might help.
It helps.
Okay, so the person that thinks they had a great childhood,
yeah,
right? They're like, it was fine, it was great, nothing, like I didn't, and in their mind, they're probably thinking, and because I thought this way too, for some extent of my short period of like maybe from 24 to 25, but no, I used to think that I had a great childhood too, right? And that the little hiccups that I thought, oh, that's, this, that, and the other. And then the more that we evolve and recognize and learn, suddenly I recognized what my childhood really was.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing that I just, like what you sparked was, because I was thinking about it from like, what do we bring forth into reality? Like, what do we create? Like we're in a dimension that is consisting of the things that we believe in. And if I believe that I had a good childhood, then that's my reality. And then at some point, that reality changed. But the thing that makes me confused, that like broke my brain for a moment, was like, in the reality where I think I have a good childhood, why do I still have the remnants of the abuse showing up in all of these other ways?
Yeah. Because
it's like, if my reality that doesn't exist yet,
yeah,
then why am I feeling the effects of it in my body? Okay. Does that make sense?
Are you asking? Or?
Hold on. And then just that concept, that idea makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And then the next part was, that means that we're bringing energy from a different dimension, because there is something that's correlating and connecting through my body from one dimension to the other. Because this dimension here, Craig thinks he has a beautiful childhood and everything was fine. And this dimension here was vastly different, a childhood full of abuse. And over here, I have one vision of my life and my childhood, right? But over here, I see it much clearer. And the energy of what really took place, because literally this is the reality, right? Where both of those things exist. Mm-hmm. And in this reality where all of the damage was done and all of the trauma was, dumped onto the body. Mm-hmm. And then I split from that reality. Mm-hmm. But the remnants of all of the energy still exists. So it's like I bring the energy and the trauma and the abuse and the emotion from this reality. And then when I split, I bring parts of, see.
Are you okay to keep going this way?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay. Because what you're saying is like really, really big. It's really, really big. Is it making sense? It's making complete sense. And it's like it's a really big deal. It's a really big space. It's a vulnerable space to step into. So that's why I'm like checking in with you, like if you're okay to keep going this direction.
I'm okay right now.
Okay, well you get to opt out at any time.
Full disclosure.
Full disclosure.
Slam that fucking door shut.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'll keep it podcast friendly for the part, right? But so what you're saying makes complete sense because you have this whole version of your childhood, right? You have this whole, I had a great childhood, connected family, like things were like great. And that part of you that experienced that is very real.
Right.
All of those memories happened. You're not like that's real, that part of you. And another part of you experienced and handled all the shit and tucked that away. And when we look at like the parts work in a sense of it, these parts that are showing up, it's still because a lot of this is still new to you. The shift is still so significant that while you're contextualizing it and understanding it, you still describe it as, no, these are different dimensions. There's still such an extreme separation here. Okay.
This fucking week, babe.
Yeah.
Holy shit. We'll have to take a look at what fucking happens during this week in our lives, because there's something about this Monday through Friday, man. It hasn't stopped. Thank you for continuing to share your thoughts with me. What is really hard for me to realize, and you did a beautiful job of helping me see it and understand it, because it was clear as day to you, perhaps, but it's clear as day to me now in this moment that, like you said, the realities are so different that I had to do that to survive. Yeah. It has to, like, one of the things that I'm really, really grateful for, I'm just grateful for it at this point, is one of the coping mechanisms that I developed was this imagination, like the belief in magic, like the whole, like as a child, dissociating so much from my reality in order to survive that suddenly, magic existed. Yeah. Like I've always believed in magic. I've always believed in something. And I know that there's like what I'm believing in in those moments as a kid as magical things, like watching The Never-Ending Story and then having a dream where I was wearing the necklace and then waking up and panicking because I couldn't find it. And I was certain that it was in my bed, and like going through my sheets and trying to find this necklace because I just was wearing it. So I've always believed in magic. And now through the lens of my 42-year-old adult version, right, what I'm talking about is I've always believed in energy. I've always felt the higher connection of everything that's existed. There's one realm, there's one reality, there's one truth that's really what was happening.
Yeah.
And then there's another truth where this little boy had to create fantasy in order to survive because of everything that had happened and was continuing to happen. And so when I catch myself as an adult still believing in magic as a coping mechanism rather than just a, oh my God, this is, because what I'm trying to articulate is like the thing that hits, the thing that you touched upon is this little shame spot where it's like, oh, I'm just pretending because my real life sucks so fucking bad. So I have to be magical. I have to become like invincible through magic in order to survive. And then you just helped me understand that what I was just trying to explain, 10 minutes ago about different dimensions and why is this coming from this place and this coming from that place was my magic taking place right in front of me in order to protect me from that harsh fucking truth of what the reality really was. Because like you said, it's only been 2 years of knowing that reality. So it's still really, really hard to be in.
Yeah.
And energy is real.
And energy is real.
And magical shit exists.
It does.
And we feel it and connect with it. And
absolutely.
Like that's our world.
Mm-hmm.
Is fucking magic. So it's so hard to hold those two things at the same time to recognize, like, it's that whole thing of like one person's medicine is another person's poison. Like the thing that protected me my whole life, eventually I have to be willing to look at it from another angle in order to continue to, because if I just stay in this, we're off in the rails now.
No, it's a big deal. Trying to hold the space between the magic that you know to be true and believe and feel and magical thinking. That's like the double bind that puts you in that tunnel vision of like only one can be true. Mm-hmm. And that's just not the case. So like that awareness and the way you're processing it makes total sense and it's totally valid. Like everything that you're expressing right now just clicks and it lands so perfectly. And you're doing a good job of finding words for it.
That's really so fascinating.
What's that?
When it, because earlier, like I said, the 10 minutes ago when this happened and I was trying to hold on to the thought.
Yeah.
It flashed so quickly that I barely caught it. Mm-hmm. But it flashed before my eyes in such a way that I could feel that it was like a key that unlocked something.
Yeah.
And the level of importance that it was. But it was like trying to go back and grab that flash and put something on paper that would then take me back to that spot.
Yeah.
Was so hard.
It is hard.
Especially like not trying to like, interrupt you and disturb the flow that you were in. And well, that feels pretty significant.
It is pretty significant.
I mean, just for my own fucking healing.
Right?
Yeah. It's so interesting.
It gets to be about your own healing.
I like that I get to bring magic into my healing.
Me too.
Like I like that I get to bring forth the, like when we do all of that type of work where we're like legitimately embodying our fucking 4-year-old little boy that's, you know, heartbroken and sad and sobbing on the floor. When we do all of that kind of stuff, I love that we can bring in love.
Yeah.
And let it be this fluid, magical thing of dancing between space and time, trying to love different parts of ourselves. Like, it feels like if we didn't have that component, then how could you heal? Right. You know? And I'm seeing it now as like, well, that's love, obviously, right? How can you heal without love? You can't. That's the human, like, that's why we're here, right? That's like, come here to heal. Well, what am I healing? Just the remembrance that you're always loved. Like, you're not going anywhere, and it's not gone anywhere, and you're never separate from it. But I don't know how we can get back to people pleasing.
So I think that, like, you did a really good job of showing, like, why it can show up so significantly in your life.
Yeah.
Of why, obviously, keeping people happy was so crucial to you. Mm-hmm. And how it can be in your space in ways that you haven't detected. So if it is in your space, instead of being like, not that, maybe you've able to help people create a safe space for themselves where they can get curious, well, then why? Like, how is this showing up in my space? When did I first feel it? Where am I acting it out? What would I want to do different? Where can I feel it in my body? What are cues for me to know that I'm doing it? What does it remind me of? Where does it take me back to? And it doesn't have to be something huge to do it. And it might be something so big that you need help with. And that is such a strong thing to allow help in. It's not a weak thing. It is a strong thing. And when we have those experiences, we figure out how to survive. The whole thing that people say, kids are resilient, right? The truth of that statement is kids are learning how to survive in extreme chaos, terror, trauma. And like, because it didn't kill them, they're resilient. Because if they happen to not go completely downhill and we're seeing them and judging them for being addicts and being, you know, all over these things, if they happen to like escape out of that, right? Or they're functioning alcoholics, then it's because kids are resilient. That's okay. Kids are resilient.
Right. The excuses and the lies that parents tell themselves.
Kids are resilient. Instead of being like, oh, this kid needs to be heard. This kid needs to be seen. This kid needs help. This kid needs love. This kid needs validation. And when you take that context and apply it to yourself, that's the adult that's listening right now, this kid needs to be loved, seen, heard, validated. Needs to have somebody come and sit with them. And like, you get to do that for your child. And whether it's you have kids in your space now that you can literally do that for your child, or
the truth of it is, if you're thinking that you're ever going to have kids in your life and you don't have kids right now and you want to have kids, guess what? Your kids are inside of you right now.
Yeah.
Right. If you're a woman, your kids are inside of you right now.
Yeah. They're picking up on everything that you experience. That's like going into the egg, the epigenetics. They're feeling that if you're pregnant right now. And now that sounds scary. Like, I can imagine being pregnant and be like, oh my God. Like just like the realization of, and just like to put it into the context of, I did everything right when I was pregnant. Mm-hmm. I did everything right. I read that licorice, I think it was black licorice, can raise your blood pressure. So I'm like, check, no licorice, no caffeine. I did everything that I could possibly do. And
like, you quit smoking immediately.
With my first one, immediately. Well, not immediately. It was like, I think it was like, honestly, it was like a month in, because it was hard. Yeah. And I was like trying so hard. And then my mom told me, just picture you putting a cigarette in that baby's mouth. I'm like, cool, I'm done. So like, that worked, but it was so hard. But I immediately was like 1 to 2. And then that was it. And then the second child that I birthed, I didn't have to quit because I wasn't smoking. And my babies were, and I found out early. I found out both of them. My body was like, hey, 4 weeks, both of them. So that's early to find out. And my babies were they were born small. There was some complications. I couldn't figure out, right? And then when I found out it's stress, the stress that I was under, that affected them, I'm like, I am garbage. I'm garbage. I did this, everything that's wrong. And they're like, it's heavy. So when you're hearing this and you're like, that's fucking heavy, don't tell me that. I just want to wrap my arms around you and be like, it is heavy. And there are people that are going to help you carry that because it's not your fault. And we can't change anything. We can't change what has happened. We can't change what we have experienced. We can't change the energy that are in our bodies from past, but we can start here. And when you're feeling that heavy, and maybe that inspires you to take a deeper breath, just one deeper breath where you just take a deeper breath. Maybe that'll inspire you to say no to something. Maybe that'll inspire you to give yourself a hug. You don't have to change everything. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to change the world you don't have to spend the rest of your life making up for your sins because you had stress in your body. And at some point you're going to be a birthing body, but it's an opportunity to give yourself some love and space and grace. And if you're not a birthing body, you still deserve it. If you're never going to deliver kids from your body, you are just as valuable, just as worthy, and you absolutely deserve it. You deserve it just as much. And so take time. I don't know what I'm feeling right now. I am so emotional. Now I'm just now I'm not feeling vulnerable, but I'm let me hug everyone. Let's just sit here and do one of those hugs where we hug each other. It's everybody's hugging, so we're all getting love and giving love at the same time. And we're just let's just everybody give an emotional hug right now, because we all need it. Wherever you are, whenever you're listening, the energy of the space is there, and I believe it. And we're just sending love, and whatever love you want to send, we're also receiving love. And so it's just we're in this. We are in this together. We are doing it. We are making changes. We are learning. We are growing. We are in this together. We got it, damn it. We're all doing a freaking kick-ass job.
You're amazing, babe. Before, we're going to wrap up this episode because but I want to really highlight what's the big takeaways for me before we even started this episode, and I've got a ton now afterwards, right? But I've recognized for myself, now I have a new perspective of my nervous system was never regulated. So it wasn't that I was living my life in a regulated state and then something would happen and I would go into a triggered state, meaning the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. That's not ever been my reality my entire life. My whole entire life, my normal regulated state was the fawn response. And then something would happen and I would be activated into some of those other responses.
Yes. That is the perfect way to describe that.
My base.
Oh my goodness.
Living was the fawn response. Mm-hmm. And then.
That was your baseline.
That was my baseline. Right.
So that's why you only recognize the other responses, because that was holy shit, cracked my brain just wide open right there.
That's why I could see the fight, the flight, or the freeze plain as day. And I knew when I was in those states after the fact, I could put some of those pieces together and recognize, because it's oh yeah, I know what causes that. And I go into those states. And I thought that in my mind, the majority of the time when I'm activated in a triggered response, my go-tos were fight. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was the main place that I needed to focus and do my work was in the fight response, because that's where I was most triggered and most activated. But the truth of it was I was in the fawn response all the time, my whole life. And I might go into fight.
Yeah.
For a moment because of some activation or some experience, but then I would come back down to fawn, because my default mode is people pleasing, because my default mode is my needs are nowhere.
Yeah.
And you're my priority, because I am so connected to you for my survival, because that's love. Isn't that nuts?
That is, this is another thing you brought to me. I'm hold on. I learned this right now, and I need to sit and absorb that, because I did not have that piece. And this also connects to our CPTSD episode that we did. And I'm just hold on. I have so much. I have to absorb that.
The only reason I can see it this way now is because I know what the really like just regulated state feels like.
Yeah.
I move through that place now, not all the time. I'm recognizing that I'm still in the Fawn the majority of the time. It's probably like 75-25. But I'm getting 25% of my time in a natural, regulated state of peace and calmness.
That's so amazing.
And things will come in and trigger me, but I come right back to this place where it's just regulated. And I'm not people-pleasing in that regulated state. I'm not sitting there trying to make sure that you're okay. Stephanie's upset. She's mad at me. She's angry. What's wrong with her? I've got to fix it. Right? And I'll just be in this really nice little safe place of boundaries that I've created and held for myself, which is how you maintain a regulated nervous system, right? Recognizing what triggers it and activates it. But that's the only reason I can see that I've been in Fawn my whole life, because otherwise I had no other reality. That was my reality. So then they're like, it's like telling the fish that they're in water. And the fish is like, what is this fucking alien talking about? Right? I can just picture like my head going underwater in a scuba mask, and the snorkel's coming out and the fish swims by, in water. And the fish looks over at a fucking alien speaking some language. And he's like, what is that guy talking about? Because the fish is just living. Yeah. And then one day the fish jumps out of water. And it's like, oh, that's the natural state, right? Like when I'm in a place of peacefulness and moving through life, holy shit, does that feel good? Right? But genuinely, I mean, it's maybe in the last 18 months, maybe. I want to say maybe just this year, but I want to give myself a little bit more credit. But the truth of it now is when I see it through the lens of, oh, my baseline is the Fawn response, then I recognize, yeah, it's probably only within this last year that I've experienced that. If you really think about it. And if you, Stephanie, think about it, knowing the information that you know, then it's obvious of, oh yeah, this year would be the first time that I would feel that. This would be the first time in my life where I felt what it was like to not be in the Fawn response. That feels pretty good.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep doing that.
Encourage you so much. Yes. High five you.
Anything else you'd like to say, love?
I want to celebrate you, but I'm not going to do that too on the podcast. But when you're open for that, I have a lot that I want to share with you.
Next week, right?
After your hot tub.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing. Why we don't need to add anything up. That was beautiful. Thank you for showing up that way.
Let us know if you resonate. Maybe you've been aware of this, or maybe you see it from a different perspective or a different angle, or maybe you kind of just had your mind blown and in a good way, blown open into some new reality where you can see your life in a different way, and hopefully it brings some healing.
Yeah. And if you just held space for this episode and just listened, we're just here and present. Thank you. That was,
thank you for
we felt it from wherever it was, like it was a part of it, and we're grateful.
Thank you so much. And our tagline moving forward for like henceforth is expect the best,
plan for the greatest.
Did we mess it up?
No, I just wasn't sure if you wanted me to say it or not, because I know last time I messed it up. So I'm like, do I say it? Do I say it? Do you say it?
Oh, and the question what we were going to answer, because we usually do those at the end of the episode. We'll save that for next week. But expect the best, plan for the greatest, everybody. Thank you. We love you.